Thank you. Welcome everyone. It's really nice to have you here. Thank you so much for pushing through with your extra little hump at the end. Technology, you know, what can I say? I appreciate everybody being here. For those of you that I have not met before or perhaps only spoken on the phone, my name is Anna Gunther, and I joined Vital Communities about a year ago, just in time to help out with this event in July. In some ways, it's hard to believe that a whole year has already passed, but it's much easier to believe when I read about how much you have accomplished since our last showcase. Then and now, it's a wonderful event to organize, technical snafus aside, because so much of the preparation is that I just talked to you. I listened to the work that you've pursued, the challenges you've faced, usually overcome, and the paths that you've taken to get you and your energy committees where you are now. What I've learned from talking to town energy committee chairs and volunteers is that even as you feel alone or overwhelmed or frustrated, you are out there making tangible progress at your local level, and we are here tonight to track and celebrate that progress. If you registered for the event, you would have received a link to a PDF document summarizing the 2021 highlights and contact information for the Upper Valley's active town energy committees with an accompanying map. Please make use of these documents to network, to collaborate, to learn from each other. And I want to thank our partners, BCAN in Vermont and Local Energy Solutions in New Hampshire for facilitating collecting all of that data. If you didn't pre-register, but you did somehow get the meeting code and you're here now with us, you can send your email address in a private chat and we can make sure to include you in the event follow-up resources. I am joined by two of my colleagues tonight, Sarah Brock, who many of you have worked on Solarize and Weatherize campaigns with, and our other colleague, Leona, who is helping us wrangle technology. Very grateful for Leona being here tonight, especially in the last 5 minutes.
We also have Sarah Jackson here from Vital Communities, who's our executive director. If you haven't met Sarah, she's wonderful and she has a great name. And I will just chime in briefly to say hello. I see a lot of familiar faces. Many of you have worked with me over the years as part of your energy committee or otherwise. And Anna and I were talking, and this would have been our 15th year of having an annual energy committee roundtable where all of us got together and had dinner in a big room and got to sort of rub shoulders and remember that we're not alone in this. And it's been really hard to not do that for the last now 3 years. And I am just really crossing my fingers that by the time we get to a year from now, we're not going to be calling into Zoom. We're going to be back at the fireside or some other lovely location having a meal together. So channel that energy, hang in there, and just know that I personally am really glad to see you tonight.
Thanks, Sarah. And thanks, Sarah Jackson. Nice to have you here. I'm going to run through some really boring technical housekeeping stuff on our agenda. I'll try and get through that quickly. As I said, Leona is here to help with technology. So if you are having any problems once you've gotten in, just put it in the chat and Leona will do her best to help you. The agenda of the evening, first, we're going to take a brief moment to go into breakout rooms and have just a little one-on-one human connection. Please take advantage of the random pairings to introduce yourself, share your location and a project that you feel good about related to energy or climate that's happening in your area. A few Zoom technicalities. If you find yourself alone in a breakout room and no one has joined you after about 30 seconds, you can just come back to the main room and chat with me when anybody that is in the main room. When you are in the breakout room, the way to return to the main Zoom room, if you're not staying in until it kicks you out, is the leave room button on the bottom right. But beware, the leave room button is right next to the leave meeting button, which will kick you out of the event entirely. So I've done it before. Just take care which button you're pushing. After the breakout rooms, we'll come back to this main room. You'll hear a little bit more from me of highlights and common themes from the surveys. After that summary, I will welcome our 5 presenters for about 5 minutes each. They'll present back to back, and we'll have time at the end for a group question and answer period. please feel free to use the chat box throughout. If you have any questions, again, for the presenters, please go ahead and put them in there while you have the idea, even though we may not get to the question later, because it's good to capture the idea while it's fresh. We will aim to wrap up by about 8:15. If you have a question in the question and answer time that's too long or too complex, or you are not able to write it out, you're welcome to use the Zoom feature to raise your hand or to just type into the chat that you'd like to speak, and we can invite you to unmute yourself and ask your question directly. We will send a follow-up email with links to the slides from the presentation and the video today, and another link to the survey summary document and map that I referenced earlier, which I will reference several times tonight to encourage you to use it. And I think that is the housekeeping. So before we dive into tonight's programming, we're gonna all pretend we're in one of these big, beautiful conference rooms that y'all used to gather in, and pretend that you're turning to a person next to you to introduce yourself. In addition to where you're from or located, I want to invite you to share a local project related to energy or climate. It can be something you're working on or something that you've heard of that someone else is working on, just that you feel good about, a bit of good news sharing. We will put the prompt in the chat. Thank you, Sarah. And when Leona tells us we are good to go, we will go into our breakout rooms.
All right.
And sorry to interrupt those conversations, and certainly look to the follow-up resources that we will share with you by email if you want to further connect with any new friends that you may have made. We hope that that moment of one-on-one connection reminds you how many others are working alongside you in their own towns, even as COVID continues to impact how we live and how we organize. Just a moment, a double screen problem. Here we go. As I read through last year's surveys, as I mentioned, one of my first tasks at Vital Communities, I was struck by the collective movement forward that we can see in the Upper Valley when we zoom out to the larger regional picture. Progress can be hard to see when you are in the middle of making it. As I read through this year's surveys, the two themes that stuck out for me were collaboration and crisis. Let's start with crisis. In your surveys, I heard an amplified urgency to address the climate crisis at our doors. Climate change as a politicized or divisive topic is nothing new to this crowd, but the deeply emotional way that you expressed your frustrations made me step back and realize that this year it felt a little different. I want to share 3 quotes that stood out from your surveys. Social apathy and/or ignorance of the scale of problems we face is overly disappointing. Each of us needs to do what we can to mitigate climate change. It's no longer in the future, and it's no longer up to other people. We find that energy and climate issues are inextricably linked, and hoping other towns are on the same page, since it is the issue of our time. Increasingly variable weather, like drifting wildfire smoke in our air last July, is just one touch point in a cavalcade of natural disasters that have shifted climate change from a future concern to a contemporary crisis. We saw a 50% increase in interest in climate adaptation and resilience projects in New Hampshire. As you prepare for a well-adapted and resilient future, you are thinking and talking more about disaster resilience, from hyperlocal community gardens and food networks to mutual aid. One of the most interesting projects to me this year was a small one. It was a drinking water quality survey, noting that in the event of weather disaster, this Vermont town wanted residents to know where they could get clean drinking water. This kind of dramatic and preparatory thinking, while scary, is something that we are all facing, and you especially are facing as you work on the front lines of your community's progress. So, is there an antidote to this feeling of crisis? Could it be that working in community with our neighbors, we can relieve some of this valid and legitimate stress and anxiety? I very much hope so, and that brings me back to collaboration. As much confluence as there is in your work across our bi-state region, there is an equal amount of divergence. What is low-hanging fruit for one committee may be completely unreachable to another. Where I did find consistency was success through collaboration. Collaboration spills over in the survey anecdotes. Over 10 towns last year and even more this year are collaborating on a free traveling e-bike lending library, a program that boasts a high post-borrow e-bike purchase rate. Randolph has been Zooming with Hartford climate and energy groups. Like other towns, Chelsea, Vershire, and Corinth are collaborating on a window dressers build. Window Dressers, a volunteer-oriented program that centered around a group build, continues to be extremely popular in Vermont. One small Vermont committee wrote, "We've struggled to find projects that got good community response. Window Dressers was our first success." Hanover and Norwich also partnered on a window dressers build, modeling collaboration across state lines and showing that collaboration is not only for small committees. The towns of Granville, Hancock, Rochester, Stockbridge, and Pittsfield, Vermont, are all organizing together under the umbrella of an ad hoc citizens committee, the Valley Energy and Climate Action Committee. Collaboration doesn't and shouldn't look the same everywhere. For many of you, the last 2 years have been an opportunity to reevaluate how your committee is functioning or your group is functioning and how you can best collaborate with each other. Some towns find success working in close partnership with elected officials, even boasting a select board member on their committee, while other groups are finding that the freedom they gain by not serving under a select board allows them to function autonomously with greater impact and effect. The 8 towns in Vermont who share an intermunicipal regional energy coordinator, or IREC, uniformly report accelerated progress as a direct result of creating that position. One member wrote, "In general, our participation with the IREC has been a huge success. The collaboration with other steering committee members and the professional expertise of the IREC have been magnificent." Whether as complex as an 8-town regional coordinator or as simple as Bristol and Bradford, Vermont co-hosting community solar Zoom programming, collaboration fulfills our need for connection, pools resources, builds stronger neighbor networks, and produces results. I was pleased to notice after writing this summary that all 5 of tonight's presenter stories feature an element of collaboration key to their success. Whether a cultivated relationship with elected officials, joining a 19-town and counting community power coalition, drawing on the resources of an academic institution like Dartmouth, or simply reaching across the river to do work with your neighbors in another state, each of tonight's stories exhibits how collaborations can propel your work forward. We're here tonight to celebrate the work that you have done and to look forward to the better future you are creating for the Upper Valley. In that spirit, it is my pleasure to transition to our 5 storytellers for the evening. As a reminder, our 5 towns will present back to back, and we'll have time at the end for 15-20-minute group question and answer period. Though again, please put the questions in the chat as they occur to you if you want to. And next, I will share my screen, do a brief run through of who we'll be hearing from tonight, and then invite Kathleen to begin. Just a moment. Okay. So tonight, first we'll hear from Kathleen, Bigford, and Bradford, New Hampshire about how their energy group has adapted and changed over the last 2 years while also successfully weatherizing town buildings. Then we'll hear from Joelle and Courtney in Enfield about joining the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire and soliciting community buy-in from town residents. After that, we'll hear about Sustainable Hanover's increased commitment to diversity, justice, and inclusion and how that is manifesting in their projects. And finally, we will have a co-presentation from Joanna in Cornish and Diane in Windsor, sharing with us how they collaborated on a successful 2022 residential Solarize campaign. I would like to invite Kathleen to unmute herself and take the stage.
Joanna, it's a pleasure to be here and welcome everybody. This is a story about little old Bradford, New Hampshire. We are located near Lake Sunapee in New Hampshire. And this is the story of the beginning of our energy committee and what we've been able to accomplish in the past 3 years. So we started, this story begins in 2019 when a few Bradford residents formed an unofficial committee to save money on electricity and reduce the town's operating expenses on fossil fuels. As we were forming this committee, we joined the Warner, New Hampshire Energy Committee for a few meetings just to get some advice and see what had been happening there over the past dozen or so years. They have a really wonderful solarized municipal array there. And that wasn't something that we were going to be able to do. Even now, after 3 years, we're still struggling with that kind of a venture. But anyway, one of the first things that they advised us to do was to weatherize the buildings that were using the municipal buildings that were using the electricity. So the group agreed on that. And so here are the steps that we followed kind of in a nutshell. Please ask questions if you want more information. The first step that we followed was to have an energy audit done of 4 town buildings, which were the major users of electricity in the town. And I got in contact with the auditor who had performed the audits in Warner, New Hampshire. And I forwarded to her the energy consumption data that we had. And the information that came back from her initially was that she could perform the energy audits at no cost to the town, funded by Eversource through New Hampshire Saves funds. New Hampshire Saves is an energy efficiency program with financial and technical assistance to municipalities, residents, schools, and others. It's funded and administered by the utilities, some utilities in New Hampshire, Eversource being one, Liberty, the New Hampshire Cooperative, and Unitil. And the idea is that they all help people to save money on energy through incentives and rebates and ongoing education. Audits were scheduled for the spring of 2020. And in the spring of 2020, in April, our committee paused due to the COVID lockdown. And that situation pretty much deflated us until the fall of 2020, when we got some new members, one of them being an environmental engineer from Massachusetts who had a vast knowledge of electricity and systems. So it was a huge boon to our committee. And so we rescheduled the audits for the fall of 2020. They were completed pretty quickly, and we were able to receive our first report for the Brown Memorial Library in time for us to be able to contact contractors to get estimates for the work that she had recommended to be done on the library. New Hampshire Saves helped us find the contractors, and the committee chose a contractor. And then we were tasked with finding the funds for this. They were nowhere in the budget, and the library didn't have the budget. The town budgeting had already been done for 2021. So we found that we could get an article to request the money from the town to put on the town warrant by circulating a petition. which we did. And we easily got enough signatures to put this on the warrant. It went on the warrant and it was recommended by the select board, which was really a fortunate thing to have happen. And then our town meeting in 2021 was in April, and the weatherization proposal for the Brown Memorial Library was passed by voice vote. The weatherization was completed in December of 2021. So that's our story. We were so pleased to have it, have that particular outcome. One of the things that I didn't really mention, but I think is worth mentioning is that in our sessions with the Warner Energy Committee, they strongly advised us to have a select board member on the committee. And fortunately for us, that turned out to not be a problem, because the first person to contact me about forming this committee was a select board member. So, and that has continued through, we don't have the same member at the moment, but it's understood that a member of the select board will sit on this committee. So that's our story. I think that's all that I.
Great. Kathleen, do you want to just mention the town hall timeline? Because I think that's very impressive.
Oh, yes, we have a town hall in Bradford that it's an 1850s town hall that was moved from one location to another location. It was used for decades, and then for the past decade and a half, it has been empty because of building codes and restoration that was not feasible. It couldn't be funded by the town. So a lot of work has been done over this past decade to be able to restore this building. And finally, this past year, 2022, we were able to put together the funding rationale for it and pass it at town hall. It also helped that the rules for passing additions to the budget in New Hampshire, the percentage of votes needed was changed from 2/3 to 60%. So unfortunately, it probably would have passed in at least 2 of the other 10 years, but fortunately, we were able to pass it this year, and the select board is very interested in having the Energy Committee contribute as much as possible to the possible in ways that we can save electricity in that building, or heat it by electricity or whatever. So we're researching that as well.
Thank you. I just think the story of a decade-long effort that is now coming to fruition is something that it's worth hearing about. So I've got another slide here that has the Bradford Energy Committee website and Kathleen's email address. So if anybody wants to follow up with her, they can. Thank you, Kathleen. And next, I will invite Jo Ellen to unmute herself. She is going to talk to us about joining the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire and soliciting community buy-in from residents from the perspective of Enfield, New Hampshire. And are you with us, Jo Ellen?
I am. I'm sorry.
Great. No, I have limited visual, so great.
Right. Okay. And my visual shows you, so that's what I was confused. Okay. So in 1998, the public utilities in New Hampshire were deregulated. Since then, utility providers are not, since then, utility providers are allowed only to provide transmission and distribution of electricity. They are not allowed to own power generating plants. We can't change our transmission or distribution, but we can choose the energy source of electricity going to our homes. In October of 2019, New Hampshire Governor Sununu signed into law RSA 53:E. This new provision in the law empowers towns, cities, and counties on behalf of their residents and businesses to choose where their electricity comes from and how it is generated. It also allows communities to come together to do so. Within weeks, our Energy Committee approached our Select Board to establish a subcommittee to work on developing an energy plan for the town. Our objectives are to meet or beat utility pricing, have renewable energy sources, and prioritize cleaner, locally generated power. Since October 2019 until September 2021, we spent time educating ourselves. We had to find our way through the maze of acronyms, many of which refer to the same thing. CCA, Community Choice Aggregation. EAP, Electric Aggregation Plan. CPP, Community Power Plan. And EAC, Electric Aggregation Committee. Many other states have energy aggregations, including in Massachusetts. The change in the New Hampshire law sparked interest throughout the state. While we were educating ourselves, several communities came together and started working to create the nonprofit Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. In the summer of 2021, we requested the Select Board to sign a joint powers of agreement with CPCNH. Essentially, this empowers our community to work with the coalition as an equal member, providing us with a seat on the board, participating in decision-making for the entire coalition. The coalition officially incorporated on October 1st, 2021. The coalition has provided us with templates for a community power plan, timeline, and support for getting us up and ready for town meeting. Our Select Board authorized a warrant article for town meeting in January. We held 3 public hearings to elicit comments. Because of poor acoustics where we held the hearings, only one hearing had Zoom capability. One of the hearings was video recorded, and it was made available on Facebook, our local TV channel, and the town website. We posted frequently asked questions on our local listserv and in the monthly town newsletter. The plan was available also on the town website. And our plan was just approved April 30th, and we are so happy. And you can see on the map the communities who are current members of the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. I'm very excited that we'll be collaborating with local communities up here in the Upper Valley. Personally, I hope we'll be able to have community solar farms. Lessons learned. The most frequently asked question was, how will this affect someone's existing solar metering? Details of how that will work are still being determined by the Public Utility Commission. Rulemaking is happening right now at the PUC. Our hearings also provided us opportunities to educate the public about their electricity bills, plus their sources of electric energy. For instance, many people thought that coal was the main source of their electricity. However, for Liberty Utilities in 2020, coal accounted for only 0.1%. We requested data from each utility via email. After 3 weeks, I checked back to find one request had not been processed because it required an official request from a town official. Recommendations. Get people in your community involved, especially those who are savvy in business, energy, and governance, or governance, I should say. Any of those combinations would be helpful. My skill set and knowledge are limited when it comes to the specifics of net metering and business plans. We're very fortunate to have Kim Quirk as our subcommittee chair, who is an electrical engineer and has had her own energy business. Another recommendation is schedule public hearings both to allow for both in-person and Zoom capabilities. And another recommendation would be to maintain relationships with people and organizations. For us, it was helpful that we had a working relationship with Henry Herden when he was at Clean Energy New Hampshire before he transitioned to CPC-NH. Next steps for us, with advisory support from our subcommittee, the Select Board is authorized to arrange and contract services to implement and operate the program. That includes setting rates prior to program launch. We anticipate launching in spring of 2023. And we'll continue to work with CPC-NH as board members. I recently joined the membership committee, so I'll be available to support other communities as they are interested in pursuing community power. Look forward to your questions later. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have one more slide, again, that y'all will receive in the follow-up, and that includes some links to some of the videos of the events that Jo Ellen referenced. So next we have Judi from Sustainable Hanover to talk about their increased commitment to diversity, justice, and inclusion, equity, inclusion, and justice, excuse me. I have to admit, I cannot see the full
She's
screen.
coming, no worries.
Is
Hi,
she
Judi.
with us? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm here. The next slide, I think. They are right there. The next one is good. First of all, good evening, everybody. It's really great to see so many familiar faces. It's almost like we're together. So it's great to see you. So as many of you know, in October 2015, the National Sierra Club announced its Ready for 100 campaign. And the campaign aimed to galvanize political will in municipalities throughout the country to commit to 100% renewable energy goals. The concepts of equity, inclusion, and justice were embedded in the mission and values of this campaign. So the Upper Valley launched its campaign in August 2016 with this aerial photo on the Dartmouth Green. 125 people from over 20 towns participated, including some of you. Then on May 9th, 2017, just a little over 5 years ago, twice the total number of Hanover residents turned out for town meeting and voted unanimously to commit to what we refer to as our Ready for 100 goals. 100% renewable energy to meet our electricity needs by 2030 and our thermal and transportation needs by 2050. So Anna, you can just play that little clip.
Everything tonight on voice votes. Anyway, but don't let that influence you at all. So those in favor, the amendment did not pass. We're back to the original article. With those in favor of the article, please say aye. Those opposed, say no. This article passes.
So soon after this vote, Sustainable Hanover established an energy initiative to facilitate the implementation of these goals and establish values to guide its work. These values included a commitment to, and I quote, an accessible, inclusive, and equitable process for both getting to and maintaining our vision. After George Floyd's murder on May 25th, 2020, this commitment took on additional significance. We created a task force and established EIJ as the first item on the agenda for our monthly energy meetings. We were surprised by initial pushback from committee members worried that this might bog down our renewable energy efforts. But we reminded ourselves that these values were integral to the national and local Ready for 100 campaign, and it would be impossible to meet our goals without honoring them. We also sought help. Our sustainability director, April Salas, connected us with Matthew Delmont, who generously agreed to Zoom with us. During his remarks, Matt pointed out that there were more Black Lives Matter signs in Hanover than there were Black people, and he asked us to consider why. His short history of redlining in America opened our eyes to the role of housing in creating inequity, exclusion, and injustice. He suggested we expand our definition of who comprises the Hanover community. For example, not just those who live here, but also folks who commute here to work. Up until that point, our programs were oriented towards those who live in Hanover, in fact, own houses in Hanover. Since then, we have collaborated with others on an e-bike share program that targets commuters. And a window dressers program that prioritizes low-income households and is available to folks who work in Hanover and live within a certain distance of Hanover. We had conversations with many social service agencies, also with Jen Gantrish, our town welfare officer. And in case you don't know, every town in Hanover has a welfare officer, and they're very knowledgeable. There is poverty in Hanover, in particular situational poverty caused by such things as job loss, illness, and change in marital status. A big challenge for Hanover, though, is housing, especially for Dartmouth students. So last summer, April Salas again connected us with Sarah Kelly and Maren Greenleaf in the anthropology department at Dartmouth, who specialize in energy justice. They are now overseeing student projects that inform and are coordinate with some of our efforts. Locally, Andrew, I know you're there. Here's a nice picture of you. Locally, they are exploring the energy burden of Dartmouth students living off campus. They are conducting a survey of such students, and in collaboration with Andrew of Resilient Buildings Group, they're conducting an energy audit of an off-campus house. On a larger scale, Joanna, the same slide, they are exploring EIJ in the context of community power in other states who are ahead of us, like California, and sharing lessons learned with the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, as Joellen pointed out, CPCNH. They're also exploring how EIJ issues might impact the ability of some New Hampshire towns to participate in CPCNH. So in conclusion, we are making progress, but there's obviously much to do. And this photo reminds us, this photo was taken in celebration after the town vote, and some of you are in this picture, and it reminds us that when we say 100%, we mean 100% clean energy, not just for some, but for all. So happy to answer questions later.
Thank you so much, Judi. All right, last but not least, we have a dynamic duo from both sides of the river. It's my pleasure to introduce Joanna Sharf from Cornish and Diane Foulds from Windsor, who are co-presenting their successful residential solarized campaign just this year, collaboration between Cornish and Plainfield, New Hampshire, and Windsor and Heartland, Vermont. And let me get and Joanna, whenever you are ready.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Many of you probably know a lot about solarized campaigns. so I'll try to focus on what was useful for us. 4 towns joined forces for this campaign: Cornish, Plainfield, Windsor, and Heartland. It was a little challenging because Vermont and New Hampshire have different rules and incentives with regard to solar, from permitting to net metering, but in many ways we gained a lot from the partnership. We started late in January. We learned from solar installers that one usually should start in early fall or even the summer. But we were motivated by the fact that the 26% tax credit was expiring at the end of this year. So we pushed forward. We decided on a simple structure, no price agreements, just a commitment from a group of installers to serve everyone who was interested in our towns and complete all installations by the end of 2022. We chose to have a virtual launch event because COVID was still around, is still around. We scheduled the launch for Saturday, February 26th at 3 p.m., even though some people warned us that a Saturday afternoon was not a good time. I'm not able to see the visuals and read my script, so I'm going to try switching back. So that's our solarized poster. It's very busy, but it needed to include a lot of information. Let's see. We set hard deadlines to encourage residents to take action. So March 31st was the deadline to request a site visit. And May 31st is the deadline to sign contracts. We got 6 installers to work with us, some from Vermont, some from New Hampshire. And now I'll turn it over to Diane, who will describe how we did it.
Hi, I'm here. Can you see me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we all pitched in. You know, we worked furiously for those 4 weeks, and everybody found a way to help. We hardly knew each other. We figured out that we had among our 4 committees 2 computer techies, so they got to work doing the website and putting together the online registration platform. And there were those of us with writing skills, so we jumped into writing up the website. We wanted as good a website as we could possibly make about everything about solar. And so we threw in resources and everything we could think of. We even took a state, I think it was the Vermont State Solar Guide, and condensed it way down, which was hard work. And then there were one of the members just got to work. She took these old political lawn signs and painted them and made them into solarized signs, which were great. They were great because everybody could see, hey, this is a local thing. People are working right here, and so people paid attention to them. And, we were lucky in that a lot of us had solar panels on our own roofs or in our yards. So we were already, several of us, not me, but several were already very knowledgeable about solarization and going solar. So, and one is an electrician. So these folks, we were lucky, could proofread what the rest of us had written. They found mistakes, they could offer expertise, and then we got to work doing publicity, full throttle. We plastered all 4 of our towns with the posters, flyers, put up banners, stuck these lawn signs around, got to every listserv and Facebook social media site. And one thing that I hadn't known about before was that the US Postal Service has this direct mail thing, which allows you to pay a couple $100, depending on what part of your town you want, to have these postcards or flyers or whatever it is that you want mailed. And they will go around and deliver everything on the same day. And this was perfect for a place like Windsor with a lot of people tucked away in the woods. And I'm sure, well, that was true for all four of our towns. We have a lot of people tucked away on the outskirts. And one of the biggest wins, I think, was getting a good write-up in the Valley News. How did we pull that off? Well, we put time into wording the press release. We wanted it to be one page, concise, um, to a specific journalist and who we knew was specializing in environmental stories and would be likely to pick it up. And we knew we had to choose a different angle. We couldn't just, oh, we're holding a solarized campaign, they just stick us into the calendar and that would be the end of it. But by saying, hey, we are four towns, we're on different sides of the river, we're reaching out to each other, we can practically see each other. That seemed to work. So once that got out, we were all surprised and delighted when that suddenly appeared in Valley News, and then suddenly, to our shock, Vermont Digger picked it up, and then 7 Days, and then it just started to go viral and popped up in all these small New Hampshire and Vermont newspapers, I think even in a few TV stations. And once that happened, the registrations took off, and it was exciting to watch. And there was one other thing that I wanted to say. Four energy committees working together. Most of us barely knew each other. It was middle of the winter. It was deep pandemic, There was so much potential for just being estranged or having things not work or having it chaotic. But it did work because it was like we were all suddenly one energy committee. And Cornish, they had sort of taken the lead, and Joanna was, checking and organizing, problem solving, fact checking, and we met regularly, and it just really worked. And so when the day came that the Saturday when we held our webinar and presented the whole thing, we all sat back exhausted, waiting for something to go wrong, and nothing did. It just worked. So all I could think was, we all gave it everything we had, and we're ready for anything, and it just flew. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Joanna.
Thank you, Diane. That going for an article in the Valley News was something I would never have tried, and it's really thanks to Diane that we did it, and she kind of knew the way to target it, so that was awesome. As a result of all our efforts, even though we started late and had just 4 weeks to pull this together, and even though we had to do extra work to deal with the differences between our two states, we got 154 people to attend the virtual launch on February 26th. And it was a beautiful Saturday afternoon, so I was really impressed. Of this number, 24 were from outside our four towns. And since then, 11 more people from our four towns registered with the campaign after the launch, 59 households signed up for site visits by March 31st. And so far, 20 households have already signed contracts with 3 weeks still to go before the May 31st deadline. So we pooled our resources and our skills. We came up with a good publicity campaign. The expiring 26% tax credit served as a great incentive. We also reminded people that electricity prices are rising. We emphasized that financing is available. All the installers offered financing, and we really wanted to make sure people knew there were ways to make installing solar affordable. We use a spreadsheet that we call a people tracker, and comes from one of the many tips from Sarah Brock in Vital Communities. And I think there's a visual for that. Yes, this, you can't really, we just have one person on that we decided to make visible because of privacy. So Diane's information is on here, but basically we have everybody listed who registered for the launch event and extra people who signed up afterwards. And we use it to keep track of who requested site visits, who signed a contract, what's the size of the system and what type of system. And I'm working with the installers to keep updating this this spreadsheet. So we use the people tracker to check in on residents in our towns, ask them if they need any help or have any questions, and encourage them as the May 31st deadline approaches. By the end of the year, we hope we'll offset a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me stop sharing this, though. Again, this will get sent to you, so you will all have access to all those resources that they both mentioned. And just need to move my screens around here. Thank you, Diane and Joanna, and thank you, everyone. Thank you to all of our presenters for sharing your stories with us, and all of the volunteers here tonight who do so much for your communities and probably could have told us 5 or 10 or 15 more of those stories. And now it is question time. So I am going to, just as a reminder, you can put the question in the chat or raise your hand. And if you have trouble with the raise your hand function, you can put that in your chat. So I will scroll back up to the top and start with, is anyone doing net zero projects? That's the first question I see, which I don't know if it's directed to someone.
It was directed to everyone. Hi, Gary Hutchins, Enfield, New Hampshire. Yeah, our town just passed a bond article for $7.2 million for a new public safety service building. And I've been hammering them for a year and a half about net zero. And finally, the selectmen mentioned the words net zero. So I'm going to continue to hammer them that this building will be made net zero.
Okay, I think we have a question asked and answered. Unless anyone wants to jump in. Otherwise, Kathleen, what was the cost to weatherize the library and what are the projected savings? And I will give you a moment to navigate to unmuting yourself.
Yeah. I can give you, I was just looking to see if I could find the exact numbers, which I don't think I will be able to find right now. The total cost was around $13,000. And we were to receive a 35% rebate from New Hampshire Saves, which I think was around $3,000. So that's really the ballpark. I will mention that we still haven't received the money, the rebate from New Hampshire Saves, but we're working on it.
And then a sort of complimentary question that you may have sort of inherently just answered. How much money did the town approve for the weatherization project? Are they the numbers that you just mentioned?
Yeah, in this case, they approved the whole 13,000. We asked for that, and because we weren't really sure how the rebate would come about, and so we went for the whole 13,000, and the town will receive the rebate eventually.
Great. For Joanna and Diane, how long did it take from the idea to launch a Solarize campaign? From idea to the launch point, I guess, is the timeline. And did you get any grants or funding for the campaign?
Well, I'll let you take that, Joanna.
Okay. So basically, we decided in January, and we had literally like 4 weeks to pull it together. And many times we were ready to give up, and we didn't think it was, because we had to find solar installers. One big company told us they couldn't do it because we were starting too late. And when we finally corralled our installers, and we were worried we weren't going to have our website ready, and a whole bunch of things were like, we really felt under a lot of pressure. But so basically we had 4 weeks to pull it together. We didn't have any grants. Cornish had received a very generous donation from a resident for $1,000 to our energy committee. And we used some of that to pay for the direct mail US Post Office mailing to residents in our town. And I believe there was a grant that Heartland shared with Windsor to do that in Windsor. But basically that's, so 300 odd went to the Cornish from our, the Cornish mailing from our a donation. But most of it was just our volunteer time.
Thank you. For Judi, what are the biggest challenges that you're encountering as you work towards your 100% renewable by 2030 goal? Not a small question.
We're pretty optimistic about that goal. And it's a combination of several things. One, local solarized program that Yolanda Baumgartner, who's on this call, has been largely responsible for, she and Marjorie Rogalski. We have over 275 houses now that I know I'm going to get the wording incorrect because there's some technicality there. But anyway, they're kind of running on local solar. The town itself has pretty much met its goal for 100% renewable electricity, local solar, which is another leg in our effort. The next leg is the CPCNH. We're very much involved with that. And if that's successful, then for all the retail accounts in Hanover, that'll be a great opportunity for them. And we're just going to hear from a team from Tuck, who is looking at our large electricity consumers, like the college and the large consumers, and they're going to be presenting next week. And according to our town manager, they're acting like real professional consultants on this. It's going to be very illuminating for us. And I think they're putting together a slide deck that we hope will be useful not only to Hanover, but to other towns and how they approach their large consumers. So we are really optimistic about our electricity goal. And we think that we need to bring some professional advice in to help us with the thermal and transportation goals for 2050. That's not to say there isn't a lot of work that needs to be done. Every single item requires like incredible amounts of work. And I guess if we have the biggest challenge is we, as Yolanda has said, we have more ambition than people to, to implement it. And so I think our biggest challenge is, to figure out how to engage increasing numbers of folks in an effective way. We have a place for everybody, but we just invite everybody to be involved. And I think we need to expand now that the town has been so successful in their renewable energy goals. I think we want to be reaching out maybe to schools and to our large consumers and our residential consumers. But anyway, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, and I really love to go out on your optimistic, confident note. So I think that we can wrap up the Q&A section with that wonderful answer. And if you'll stay with us for just one more minute before we end the event, a reminder that we will pull the comments and the questions that you put in the chat and review them and connect with you afterwards. Before we go, I'd love to have a short chat storm. Leona sweetly just put the prompt in the chat for me. What are you taking away from this event, either back to your energy committee or back to your own organizing work? So if we could just take 2 minutes for everybody to type in what they're thinking, and we'll read each other's answers. And then everybody can go watch the sunset. Thank you. We have people who just learned about window dressers. We have restating of collaboration and working together with groups of volunteers. Collaboration makes us all stronger. I'm glad you guys picked up the same theme that I did. And I'm glad to see that the CPC New Hampshire information is interesting to folks as well. Thank you all again so much for making this event and making it a pleasure. Before we just say goodnight, again, I want to thank our presenters, specifically my colleagues Sarah and Leona, and each of you for spending this lovely evening with us. I know we were competing with a really beautiful day out there, so thank you for taking that time. And we will be in your inboxes. We will be following up with more resources. We look forward to doing this again next year in whatever way that happens, but please don't let that be the next time that we hear from you. Vital Communities is here to support and celebrate your organizing work year-round. So don't hesitate to reach out if we can help connect you to a person or an idea that you might have discovered tonight. So thank you again and good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.